This episode is brought to you by Deal. Managing a global team is complex. Deal makes it simpler with payroll, HR, IT, and compliance, all in one place. That's why over 35,000 businesses trust Deal to hire, pay, and manage teams worldwide. See how Deal works at deal.com/agentan to learn more. That's DEEL.com/ADRIANTAN. Deal, your forever people platform. Hey Kain, thank you for coming onto the show.
Hey Adrian, thanks for having me.
For people who are new to you, let's say someone meet you at a networking event, how would you typically introduce yourself?
So I'm Ying or Kai. I'm the founder of Dasein Partners, which is an ontological and NLP coaching service for individuals and companies. And I have prior experience in organisational development and change management in Singapore's public sector.
For people who's not that familiar, can you define what is ontological?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. They're like, is it oncological, like cancer? No, not at all. So ontological, maybe I start with the base word ontology. Ontology means the way of being. So I coach people's way of being, which consists of 3 domains. One is your language, right? What we factually see and what we label, like this is a mic. One is subjective opinions and assessments, which is very subjective, like example, this mic is nice or this mic is ugly. And then you have bigger linguistic structures in a way, like our beliefs, our stories that we bring from our childhood. So the first domain is of course language and how we perceive the world through language. The second domain is emotions. So emotions that we typically feel that comes out a lot in certain situations, or even emotions or moods that we actually want to access more that we're not very familiar with. And then the last domain is body. So when we interact with the world, we can't just bring our brains and our hearts to that conversation or that interaction. We have to bring our body. But very often times we are not aware of how our body shows up. And hence, in my coaching, I don't just coach people on the language they use or they hear and perceive, the emotions they feel, but I also coach them on their body. Are they even aware of the internal sensations they feel throughout their body? What kind of meanings do they associate to these sensations? And of course, what is the outward body presence language that they bring to communicate with other people?
Would that to some extent also mean that you are faking it? Because you may be mindful of a situation that doesn't warrant for that kind of behavior physically in some sense, but because the premise expects it, so you have to just put on a mask and fake it.
I don't really believe in faking it till you make it. Because our body is always linked to our internal narratives and emotions. So for example, I would then ask if the person feels like it doesn't warrant that kind of body, then I'll ask, actually, how would you want to show up in this? Let's say it's a high stakes conversation that they're going to have with their boss. How would you want to show up in this conversation with your boss? And let's say they say, I don't have a very good relationship with my boss. I want to show up as calm and confident. Then, okay. Well, you can say you want to be calm and confident, but do you actually know how that feels like in other situations? Right? Maybe you've had that in the past. So what is preventing you from being calm and confident this time round? Okay, then they do a bit of exploration around their beliefs. Let's say they're a bit afraid of the boss. Then I'll say, okay, so if you want to be calm and confident, then let's be in that body of calm and confidence. Notice like your breathing, does it slow down? Your heart rate, does it slow down? And then what can keep you in that space of calm and confidence? So if they say, when I'm calm and confident, I actually notice that my shoulders open up, they widen up. As opposed to when, let's say, last time with this boss, I'm always anxious, so I always tense up. So then I say, okay, why don't you tense up right now and see, can you be calm and confident? If you find it quite hard. Because there's always a very distinct incongruence between this kind of body and the kind of body we want to be. And then when we are in the opposite, so this open confidence stance, it's easier for us to then access the language and emotions that, I don't feel as anxious anymore once I open up my shoulders. So I think it's not faking it till you make it. It's realizing how interconnected our body is to our language and our emotions. And then if let's say we find that we're stuck in the language, like I want to be confident, but I cannot think confidently, then I will invite them to intervene through, let's say, their body first to lead to that.
I was in choir before during high school, and our music teacher always tell us how our posture will actually affect the way we project our voice, because our diaphragm is the key to projecting our voice. And if you have to sit down, you have to squeeze it a little bit, try to hunch forward a little bit, all this will actually have an impact, which is why for singers, when they really want to pitch out, right, or project themselves, they have to stand. They have to go chest outward, because that is the way to maximize the projection that you have. So to that point, I think I'm really reminded of my music teacher or my choir teacher in telling us that, because it does make sense when you try to cram yourself in a very awkward setting and try to be confident. How do you be confident when you try to cocoon yourself into a fetus?
Yeah, a good tip. Now I know how to sing better.
Now, I do understand your background is truly pretty unique. You have quite a number of life experiences that I want to touch on one by one. But let's start first with the fact that you grew up as a competitive table tennis player. It must have been intense. I passed by sometime Pasir Ris Sports Center, and I've seen how kids, very young kids, compete. The strokes, the velocity of the strokes that they were doing through, I just cannot imagine myself going through that. How did that experience shape your outlook on life? And importantly, does it have any bearing on how you actually approach your coaching nowadays?
I picked up the bat when I was 7. My brother watched the 2000 Olympics with Jing Junhong. Don't know if you remember that player. He was inspired. Then our parents enrolled us in, and then that was when I started table tennis, all the way playing up till the youth development squad in Singapore Table Tennis Association, then the national table tennis training team when I was 15 till I was 18. So we were training very intensively at sports school. How intensively? Almost every day, sometimes 2 shifts a day. So after school, it will be the afternoon shift, and then it will be, actually no, on weekends in particular, it will be the morning shift, and then it will be the afternoon shift. After school, it will be, let's say, evenings till the night. I was counting the other day, and I think it took up a good 17 years of my life. I'm in my early 30s now. And even after I left the national training team, I played all the way for my university until I graduated. It formed a very big part of my identity. Growing up in this grueling environment, and I was telling you the other day, Adrian, I don't have a very... my adolescence, my childhood are very different from people usually. I never had the chance to play in the playground after primary school classes, hang out in the mall with my friends, go walking and play games. I never had that. It was always just school, trainings, homework. School, trainings, homework. And that discipline shaped me into someone who was always striving for excellence. It shows up in the minute details. Even when you are honing your skills in table tennis, you are trying to perfect your stroke, your footwork, the micro movements that can make or break a match with a competitor. And that made me someone who really valued excellence a lot. But at the same time, I was also very hard on myself. And I think that environment played a big part in shaping my outlook like that. When we were growing up training, our coaches were primarily from China. So they brought their own way of coaching to our academy. They didn't have distinctions in language they used. It was, you suck. You're not good enough. And imagine growing up like that as a young kid, very impressionable, all the way until I was a youth. I never could distinguish really that, it isn't that I suck as a person, or I'm not good enough as a person. It's just that my skills in this point in time are not as good. And well, I mean, there's always pros and cons. It drove me to always try to be the best. And I of course, applied that to other parts of my life, even in work, even in the coaching that I do. And now I've grown out of that to even know what distinctions are and how powerful they are in actually shaping how we view ourselves and hence how we interact with other people.
The competitive nature definitely would be a good element to inherit and apply across your life. But the tiger dad or mom aspect seems a bit overkill. Are there also elements that perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you experienced through table tennis that in hindsight you felt it might not be that suitable to carry across for the rest of your life?
Perfectionism. And I don't think it's unique to table tennis. It's when you are playing a sport, you want to perfect your skill technically. But I would hold back from saying, hey, let me apply that wholly in my life. Because then that prevents me from actually be a bit more compassionate towards myself and towards others, because I in turn would hold the same very high, unreasonable standard for other people. That prevents me from being flexible. When things don't go as well, the default tendency would be, I'm fully responsible, I could have done something about it. As opposed to, okay, realizing that my responsibility is this in this situation, but there are other factors at play, other people at play that I have no control over. And having that kind of lightness and a bit of lightheartedness to go through very serious situations and not always feel like I'm carrying the burden home.
How do you then strike that balance? Because being compassionate and the quest to be competitive and achieve perfection seems to be on the opposite spectrum.
Now that I'm coaching, I actually bring a different side of myself to this profession. In striking a balance, I mean, of course, in coaching, I would still want to be good in what I do. But I no longer define mastery in coaching or mastery of self as being perfect. There is no, honestly, how do you define what perfect is? And that is a very impossible goal to reach. There will always be shifting signposts because nothing will ever be enough and you'll never be satisfied. Being good at my profession as being wholehearted. So my definition of good or perfect in this case has shifted to wholehearted presence. And let's say let's go the other end of the spectrum. Someone who is very perfectionistic and wants everything to be 100%. And then now there's this saying, okay, strike a balance, right? You want to strive for excellence, but don't be so hard on yourself. Then I think it would be ironic if we go down to the path of what is that perfect balance I want to strike? I think that is missing the point. Yeah.
The definition of perfection can be so subjective. Yes, maybe in a sports setting, it makes sense. Whoever gets the gold medal is a perfect candidate. But in life in general, there is really no such thing as perfect. And as what Mark Zuckerberg loved to say early on during his career at Facebook, done is better than perfect, which is the adage for early Facebookers in those periods. Which I think would really make sense for most of us who see our life as a startup. And we are constantly in this startup mode, right? Even if you are in your 50s, you are experiencing 50s for the first time. And done is really better than perfect. You just have to go out there and experiment and see what works rather than trying to find the perfect notion before going out. By the time you actually hit whatever you term as perfection, you hit 60 already. Then you have to start all over again. I also want to touch on another huge life experience that you've encountered, and this was during your 20s, which touched on the nerve of grief and depression. Could you share a bit more about that experience and also how that has shaped how you operate in life?
I was in NUS and I was staying on campus, so I made really good friends there. And I had a best friend who, we were in a close group of 4. We already knew that she was suffering from depression. and she had intentions to end her life. So it was a good period of almost a year actually, trying to support her, preventing her from doing something foolish. But eventually we couldn't stop it. We can't control her life, and she ended her life when I was 21. It was one of the darkest periods of my life. There's no way to really succinctly describe the emptiness, the loss, the numbness, the depression I felt. Not even after she left, but actually in the lead up to her leaving. I already felt very dead inside, and it was through this whole very trying experience that made me keenly realize how important having the support of people around you is. How important it is to always have a conversation with someone when you're not feeling well. Just talk about it and be okay to seek help. So long story short, through that period, I got exposed to social emotional intelligence work, self-awareness work, and was trained to be a youth facilitator with the Talk Collective. And it was through that whole experience being trained, also informed by ontological principles, by coaching principles, that I got to be very aware of the narratives that I held, the guilt that I felt, the shame, all this from feeling like I was responsible for my friend's death because I knew in advance that she wanted to end her life. It was working through all this, through coaching and being a recipient of masterful coaches, that really got me out of that dark period in life. And hence, that's why I so keenly feel towards coaching as a profession. I've benefited a lot from it, and now I'm in this space where I want to benefit people, not from a space of therapy or counseling, but really how to shift them forward to effect transformative change in their lives for the better, not just for themselves, but people around them.
As much as it's an unfortunate incident, it does provide the foundation to what you're currently doing, which of course helped you to start this journey at the age of 25, which is quite young for this particular field. So most people, when we talk about coaching or coaches, they will associate someone with grey hair, many accolades on their shoulder. How has being a young coach been for you, for yourself, for your clients? Is that a challenge? Is that an advantage?
It started off with me having to prove myself a bit when I was 25. I recall I attended a coach training program at that age, and even the trainer then had this belief that I was too young. I was one of the youngest there. Like, you're right, the most of them were in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And at that point, I was already very connected with my emotions through the training I had as a facilitator. So it was me starting off proving myself that I have what it takes. Then now that I'm actually 31 now, I don't face it as much anymore. Even though I'm still one of the youngest in the new field coach training program I just graduated from, I have shown up in a way, not faking, just really being myself, really knowing the work well based on my own experiences. And I've seen people notice that. So age hasn't become an issue anymore. I now coach clients from early 20s to 60s. Some clients who are much older than me have even shared that they appreciated having someone younger coaching them, because then it gives fresh perspectives. It challenges their views.
In the corporate setting, there's also this thing called reverse mentoring. Basically, someone more junior and, usually younger, mentoring someone who is a bit older and more senior. I think the genesis of it is, of course, there's always things we can learn from other people. Even if they are new entrants to the organization, there are things that I'm learning from my kids, although not proud to say, but primarily on how to do TikTok video. But other than that, there's still a lot of things that I do see from their perspective, which maybe for a typical adult, we are just so caught up in the rat race in our typical life. We don't really have time to sit down and reflect and to smell the roses, so to speak. So learning from someone younger could also be a refreshing aspect to see things from a different angle. I was just sharing earlier on with Audrey, your co-host. We were also talking about this generational thing. And I was just telling her, right now Gen Z, they have this informal communication, don't put full stop kind of thing. A full stop to them seems like an exclamation mark, basically.
This is new to me. I never knew that.
It is new to you. You find out. So in my mind, it's like, then how do I signal to them that this is my next sentence? Do I do a line break? And I was told, oh no, after one sentence you send. After one sentence you send. Which is very counter to how I usually write my message. I would like one sentence full stop, another sentence full stop. So I just do one massive send rather than many minor send. So again, I think those are things that one would have to be mindful of. We can argue until the cow come home whether it makes sense for them to cancel full stop, but it is what it is, and it's something that you potentially can only learn if you were to have this circle that you mix with of a variety of people. What you're doing essentially can be border on the line of life coaching. And life coaching, many people would seem to see as some pseudoscience, woo-woo kind of stuff.
The woo-woo, that term is not new. I've heard it before. My take on it as an ontological coach is it is woo-woo if we see it just by using our brains, think that that doesn't make sense, that is not backed by real science, or and we easily dismiss it. It is woo-woo if we are not willing to explore with openness how actually our brains are the most important thing on our body. Oftentimes we go about life just focusing on the brain and intelligence as the most important thing. And that's why at the end of the day, we get so tired, right? Because we use our brains a lot. But we have never really stopped to think about actually what is the body intelligence that we are not really listening to and maximizing it for ourselves. So I don't believe it's woo because I've seen the benefits. I've benefited from it myself. And I would invite those who think it's woo to put aside your skepticism for a bit and just explore coaching. Maybe give it a bit of time, explore your coaching and see how that goes for you. If nothing changes, okay, so be it. You've tried it. But if you've never tried it before, how can you be so sure to make a judgment about what it is?
Even when we talk about things like supplements, medication, there's a lot of placebo studies that shows that actually placebo works as well. So if you were to look into that angle, actually in a way, woo-woo does work. And I want to also share a personal story. For the longest time, I've been very skeptical about meditation. I read about people doing it, and it only finally dawned onto me that to give it a try when I read, I think it was Steve Jobs' biography that he mentioned he also does meditation. And I was just thinking, okay lah, if so many smart people thinks that meditation work, maybe I should give it a try lah. And I tried a few times. I actually tried through some apps. Initially, I feel anything different, then I stop, and then I try again. And actually, I do feel it works to a very large extent. It really makes you calmer. It really makes me less jittery in some way, and also a bit more reflective.
You tried the first time, it didn't work, right? Then you could have stopped. So why do you keep trying?
I don't really have a good answer on that. I tell myself I shouldn't just stop once, I guess. And it's something that a few of my earlier guests also mentioned. One of them, Ezekiel, actually mentioned when you want to try something new, at least try 3 times. If by third time it doesn't work, okay, then fourth time is not going to make a difference. And I was also speaking with another guest, Suyen, on something similar, and she was saying, if you try the first time and you give up, the first time it doesn't work could be circumstantial because of something outside of your control. So you shouldn't just stop the first time. So I guess in some way it was because of that. The app that I was on just didn't seem to work for me, so I just toy around, try something else. I landed on something that I felt makes sense. And so I tried at least, my second attempt worked for me, which is why I continued to try. Yeah, so ultimately, I think to each their own, whatever you find solace in and you're able to get the benefit from, whether it's woo or not, I think that is really beside the point. What works for you may not work for others, and vice versa as well. As long as you find something that works, that's your secret sauce. That's what you should continue on to try to make things better for yourself. And on that note, of course, the other thing that I'm seeing in the space of what you're doing is the saturation and the overly competitive space. Everyone seems to be a coach. Your neighbor is a coach. His cat is a coach. How do you manage to carve your space as a solopreneur?
It's very saturated, and I'm going into this industry knowing full well it is very saturated. Honestly, I go in with a lot of uncertainty. I don't know how it's going to pan out. But I know very well that this is the work that energizes me the most. A lot of people are going to courses now to be trained to be coaches, yes. But if you think about it, not all of them come out actively practicing as coaches. A lot of them also come out actually knowing that that's not their passion. A lot of them come out applying coaching principles, skills to their main business, their main practice. And that's fine. So, I don't think the whole pie has been eaten up or taken by other people. I firmly believe that there will always be a slice of the pie for myself. And there's a reason why I identify as an ontological coach and not a life coach. Also because the industry is so wide, there's so many different coaching methodologies there. It is also still a very highly unregulated industry. In ontological coaching, I bring in my expertise in somatics coaching. And of course, being NLP trained myself is also blending these two, which are very synergistic. So, I go in with a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of confidence and excitement about what this means for me.
Your past career was actually in the public service. And as much as you developed and found this passion for coaching, it could have remained a side hustle. What convinced you and motivated you to turn this coaching into a full-time thing and leave your public service life behind?
I didn't have time for a side gig. I was fully invested in my day job, which I liked to some extent, but it didn't energize me as much as coaching did. Which they always say, you may not remember, exactly the past events, but you remember the feeling of the memories that you had. And I remember how coaching made me feel when I was 21, back then, when I was 25. And I knew that then now that I'm enrolled in, and when I was enrolled in another coach training program when I was 31, the same feelings came back. And I knew that, hey, this is data points for me, If it keeps coming back and I feel the same way, it means that I really love this job. Just quit and just go dive into it full time. I'll never regret it because at least I knew that I've tried doing this full time.
Defying that energy is really so important. I was reading an article about how someone managed their time because they do so many things. And of course, you have different people giving you different advice. Time block. You can look at your season. You can maybe Monday be a meeting day, Tuesday be something else. And the latest one I read was, you identify at what point in time doing what energizes you the most. And you just lean into it. So if on Tuesday or any other day you feel that doing this particular piece of work energizes you the most, then maybe you should center around it. Because ultimately it's about leveraging and riding on that energy to build the momentum, to go into deep work in some sense, I would imagine. And that ultimately would help you to enjoy your work rather than viewing it as a chore. And I guess to some extent that is also what you felt in discovering that energy and keep getting repetition of it over and over again. Something tingling. Your spidey sense is telling you something. How should I take the next course of action?
This particular client who came into our sessions saying they wanted to quit their job. they were very clear. They wanted to set up an animal shelter. They love animals. Then they went into a whole monologue about, but if I stay on in this company, I will be promoted. It's a good job. My bosses are good. This and that, this and that. And I just asked for permission to share an observation with them that I could see an excitement on their face, a sparkle in their eyes, a smile on their face when they spoke about animal shelter, as opposed to when they later on went to speak about, the logical considerations to stay in their job. It just went to their head. It's a lot of thinking here about what seems right, but emotionally there wasn't as much conviction. And that was the point when my client just stopped and said, yeah, I know. And there was silence. And I would say that was one of the spidey senses, that there's always a tussle you may feel between your heart and your brain. So what to you is the pull? What are you choosing to listen to more or not? And why? When you understand that, hey, I'm listening to my brain more, for what reasons, then you can more clearly see the distinctions between what are some concerns that you are having an internal struggle over.
In a way, your clients were constantly juggling that notion between turning left or turning right, which of course got them to be constantly stuck at the junction because they wasn't actually moving their feet.
They're not moving.
They were just looking left, looking right. Should I go left? Should I go right? And your approach to them helped them to take the mini steps out of that junction paralysis, so to speak.
In coaching, I will never tell them go left or go right. I'm simply holding the space for them to give themselves permission to say, yes, at this point I want to go left. Or, okay, I want to go left, but I'm very clear this is not the time horizon for me. In X months, I'll go left. The power lies in them choosing the direction they want to take, the time they want to take, and them taking that first step. If I'm, as a coach, I'm pulling them by the leash, sometimes they will just stop walking and you'll see them standing in the middle of the road again.
In a worst case scenario, if they feel they have taken the wrong step, they may even blame their coach.
Yeah,
because you're the one who put me on that path. So it's really about empowering people, because most people, from what I can imagine here, they feel that they are powerless in deciding what they could do in selecting door A or door B, but actually they do have the power. It's just a means of which one is the most right one for you. If you cannot decide, if you want, you can decide logically, or you can decide emotionally, or you can decide based on a combination of those factors. But ultimately, you have to ask yourself what's exactly... I think it's, again, start with your why. Why do you want to do this?
And also knowing full well what the trade-offs are with the decisions that you make.
The trade-off part is something that I believe many of us are well tuned to look at, and unfortunately even placing too big of an emphasis on. It is so easy to just lean towards, Singapore so expensive lah. Better be stable lah. My parents want me to get an iron rice bowl and all that kind of stuff, which is legit lah. Which is legit. I'm not trying to move away from that, but I think the other aspect which I've learned from many other people is, especially when you're young, you deserve to give yourself a chance to try something that you're truly passionate about, that truly fires you up, rather than just going through the slog. Because if you want to, you can always go through the slog at 40s or 50s. It is perfectly fine, but when you have the energy to make a true difference in the world, I think that is something that people should want to be mindful of.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that inaction is also a choice.
Does coaching one person improve the entire team culture and even organizational leadership?
A very straightforward intervention is to coach the leaders, coach the C-suite. Because when you coach the C-suite, then there will be trickle-down effects to the rest of the organization. Not just C-suite, also the middle managers, to have a more direct impact to the individual contributors that they lead. Now a lot of organizations are going into coaching, getting big on coaching the leaders, the managers, and because I I do believe they see the value in coaching.
For listeners who are, somewhat sitting on the fence in action, as we were talking about, hiring a coach, but maybe not really sure on how to go about doing so, what are some advice you want to give to them?
I would ask them to live in the questions or the concerns that they currently have. Have a better understanding of what is behind their hesitation or their skepticism. Are there certain assumptions that they have made? Are they willing to challenge those assumptions? I'm not saying that coaching is the only pill or the only thing that can help them gain clarity on their issues. But coaching is a very powerful tool. So if they come to explore coaching with a very closed mindset, I'm very sure nothing will change for them because they've already come in having decided that this is not for them. So I would say if they're open to being coached, come in with eyes wide open, just come in with full openness and be willing to also have conversations where they will most highly be uncomfortable, because coaching is always about coaching the being, and hence we can go very deep personally.
Coaching is your subject matter, your genre, but ultimately you are still trying to run a business as a solopreneur. Having been on this journey so far, what are some of your challenges or some of the things that you're seeing in your journey?
One big thing is instability. The very real thing is now that there isn't a 9 to 5, there's no monthly income. At the same time, you see the monthly bills that you have to pay. Financial instability is a very real challenge. And I think if someone is thinking of starting their own solopreneur journey, they have to have done the sums, set aside a healthy budget, not just the rainy day 6 months fund I'm talking about, even more than that, to tide you through periods where you may not have any income at the start. The second thing would be giving yourself that compassion and that space to work out what is the right cadence for you when it comes to working and resting. Because now you are the architect of your own day. There is no boss saying, hey, clock in by 9, and all that. You decide what to do with your time. Don't be so hardcore perfectionist, say I must maximize my day, I must make sure I am fully productive. Humans aren't robots. So give yourself that space and be at your own pace when you decide what works well for you in your solopreneur journey. And then lastly, I would say always look for support. I think earlier I mentioned how important it is for support. It also applies in this context. I can go in 100% for my own solopreneur journey because I've gotten the blessing from my husband, from my family, my parents, and I have no fear that they have my back if anything goes wrong. Don't think you're in this alone. Even reach out to fellow solopreneurs like Audrey, my co-host, or we are on this journey together. We are like colleagues in some sense, working on some projects together. You are never alone, and it's exciting times ahead. So fully embrace it. Don't stay in uncertainty and fear. Just go in with courage and with boldness and to see what comes out of that.
Solopreneur is an understatement. You do have your support mechanism, which is your board of directors, giving you advice, mentoring you along the way, and importantly, giving you the support mechanism that you need. Because like you rightfully mentioned earlier on, it's a roller coaster ride, ups and down. You don't really know what's going to happen, especially for people who are doing this for the very first time. When it was the very first time, I personally made so many mistakes. Cutting leases when I shouldn't be cutting leases, doing a lot of mistakes along the way. And I'm just fortunate that Lady Luck was looking after me and I managed to grind through it unscathed. But for some people, it may not be that fortunate. So again, it's really trying to have the support mechanism to understand what you can lean back towards when the tough time is here. The line seems to have been blurred between a coach and what a therapist should do. Is that the way forward for the coaching scene? Is it expected for someone to be a mix, or is it just a time bomb waiting to explode?
I think it's unavoidable that there are overlaps between coaching and therapy because we are working with the individual. and we have to do deep personal work with the individual. In that sense, the lines are blurrer, but there are still distinct lines that the coaching profession doesn't cross into therapy or psychiatry, for instance. One very obvious case would be trauma work and healing with patients. That is a territory that coaching will not go into because we as coaches are not trained in that way to help patients in that sense, right? Heal from certain deep-seated or very severe traumas that they have gone through in their early years. Yeah, so there is a moral obligation that we coaches abide to. I don't think it's a problem that there is an overlap between coaching and therapy, because as long as we, as practitioners, we are responsible in living out the code of ethics, then we will never be able to do our clients any wrong.
It really depends on what are the formulation that is required to, in a sense, solve a problem. And if all this could be packaged into a single facilitator, then even better. Because I would imagine ultimately the recipient of it also want to go through the convenience of getting it solved as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. And I do see a lot of different coaches gaining more accolades in trying to better their craft, and there will definitely be some cross-pollination of how they deliver their services.
And I would say a lot of coaches are themselves therapists or psychology trained. And it works when they are also very transparent with their clients. At this point, am I wearing more of a coaching hat or am I wearing more of a therapist hat? And what is the approach they take to supporting their client?
My earlier guest, Ezekiel, he also mentioned this because over and above being a coach, executive coach, he's also an advisor to startup. So he often has to make the distinction. Okay, right now I'm talking to you as an advisor. I'm wearing my advisor cap. Okay, now I'm going to take it off. I'm going to put on my coach cap. And that really helped to, I guess, in a way, compartmentalize the kind of conversation that you want. Which I think to some people like myself, I think it's cleaner that way for me to understand what I should look out for and how I should react accordingly. And I think any decent coach should definitely make the distinction easier for your recipient or for your clients as well. And with that, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us on this show. Really lovely speaking with you to understand more about your background, how your competitive edge, your early days trauma, as well as, of course, the interesting experience that you've clocked across life brought you to where you are today, and also as an inspiration for other young people who may be looking to charter their own path. For people who may be keen to learn more about yourself and what you do, where can they find you?
They can go to my website at daseinpartners.co. So that's DASEIN partners.co. Look for me on LinkedIn. My name is Ying.
All this will be added into the show notes. Kai, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Lovely speaking with you, and I'll catch you again in Pasir Ris.
Thank you, Adrian, for having me.